Good evening, and welcome to this special breaking news report. Tonight, the world is watching with fear, uncertainty, and growing tension as several major international flashpoints are pushing the global order closer to instability than it has been in years. Military movements are increasing, air defense systems are on high alert, emergency meetings are being held behind closed doors, intelligence agencies are monitoring rapidly changing developments, and around the globe, millions of people are asking the same frightening question: are we moving toward a wider world war? At this hour, no official declaration of a global war has been made. But the signs of escalation across multiple regions have created a dangerous atmosphere unlike anything seen in recent times. What makes this moment especially alarming is not just one conflict, one border, or one military strike. It is the fact that multiple tensions across the world are rising at the same time. From the Middle East to Eastern Europe, from the Pacific to cyber warfare command centers, governments are preparing for possibilities they once hoped would never arrive. Defense ministers are speaking in urgent tones. Military alliances are reviewing contingency plans. Global markets are reacting with fear. Oil prices are under pressure. Supply chains are being watched closely. And citizens everywhere are trying to understand what happens next. Tonight, in this extended special report, we break down everything you need to know. Why fears of a wider global conflict are suddenly rising again. Which regions are causing the biggest international alarm? What world leaders are saying behind the scenes? How military alliances could shape the next phase? Why economic pressure is becoming part of the battlefield? And whether the world is truly heading toward a historic and dangerous turning point. This is not just another ordinary news cycle. This is a moment that could define the future of global peace and security. Let's begin. Section 1. Why the world is so nervous tonight. To understand why global fear is rising so quickly, we first need to understand something very important. Modern world conflict does not begin the same way old wars began. In the past, large wars often started with official declarations, major invasions, or clearly visible military actions. Today, however, the road to global war is far more complex and dangerous. It can begin with a cyber attack, a drone strike, a naval incident, a missile interception, a border clash, a military miscalculation, or even a political decision that triggers chain reactions between powerful nations. And that is exactly what has experts so concerned tonight. Around the world, the international system appears more fragile than it has in a long time. Rival powers are no longer simply competing through diplomacy and trade. In many areas, they are now confronting each other through military posturing, proxy conflicts, sanctions, intelligence warfare, and strategic pressure. This creates a terrifying reality. The world does not need one giant war to start all at once. It only needs several connected crises to spiral out of control. That is the fear now driving headlines, emergency meetings, and military readiness across the globe. In recent days and weeks, international observers have reported signs of growing instability in multiple key regions. Defense analysts say that while each crisis may appear separate on the surface, they are all connected by one larger trend: a weakening of global trust and a rise in military risk. And when trust breaks down between nations, the chances of misunderstanding, overreaction, and escalation increase dramatically. Tonight, world leaders are not just asking whether a new conflict will begin. They are asking whether the world can stop several conflicts from combining into one historic global emergency. Section 2. The Middle East, the most dangerous flashpoint. If there is one region that many analysts believe could trigger a wider international crisis faster than any other right now, it is the Middle East. For years, the region has remained one of the most volatile areas on Earth. Long-running rivalries, military alliances, armed groups, missile programs, border disputes, and foreign intervention have created a highly unstable security environment. But now, concerns are rising that several overlapping tensions in the region could create a chain reaction far beyond local borders. Military alerts have intensified. Airspace concerns have increased. Defensive systems are being watched carefully. Naval activity in surrounding waters remains a major concern. Intelligence communities are closely following every signal, every movement, and every public statement. Why does this matter so much to the rest of the world? Because the Middle East is not just a regional battlefield. It is a strategic crossroads tied to global energy supply, international trade routes, military alliances, and geopolitical influence. If a wider war erupts there, the consequences would not stay local. They would hit global oil markets, shipping routes, food prices, investment confidence, air travel, and international diplomacy almost immediately. And perhaps most worrying of all, the region contains many situations where major powers and regional actors are indirectly connected. That means a conflict between two forces on the ground can quickly pull larger countries into the crisis, either politically, economically, or militarily. That is why every strike, every military warning, and every emergency statement from the region is now being watched with extreme seriousness. The greatest fear among observers is not simply one attack. It is retaliation, counter-retaliation, and loss of control. History has shown that once cycles of retaliation begin in such a tense region, it becomes increasingly difficult for leaders to step back without appearing weak. And in a military environment, the pressure to respond can be stronger than the pressure to de-escalate. That is why diplomats are working urgently, even if much of that diplomacy is happening quietly and far from public view. But tonight, despite all calls for restraint, one truth remains clear. The Middle East remains one of the world's most explosive and unpredictable flashpoints. And if things go wrong there, the consequences could be global. Section 3. Europe, a continent still living with war fear. Across Europe, the mood is also tense. Even after years of warnings, diplomacy, sanctions, military aid, and alliance building, the continent continues to live under the shadow of modern war. Security planners, defense officials, and intelligence agencies remain deeply concerned that any sudden shift in the regional balance could trigger new escalation. For many European nations, this is no longer just a distant foreign policy issue. It is now a matter of direct continental security. Military readiness has become a major focus. Defense spending has increased in several countries. Strategic planning has intensified. Emergency stockpiles, logistics corridors, and troop mobility have become more important than they were just a few years ago. Why? Because Europe understands something very clearly. When war returns to the continent in any form, it changes everything. It changes defense policy, it changes economics, it changes elections, it changes public fear, it changes international relations. And it forces governments to think not only about what is happening today, but what could happen tomorrow if deterrence fails. Many European leaders have publicly repeated that peace and stability must be protected at all costs. But behind those statements lies a harder reality. They are preparing for uncertainty. The biggest danger in Europe right now is not just active fighting in specific zones. It is the risk that a localized military situation could spread through accidents, misjudgments, supply disruptions, or alliance responses. Even incidents involving airspace, surveillance, or border pressure can suddenly create enormous diplomatic and military consequences. This is why Europe remains on edge tonight. The continent has seen enough of history to know that the early warning signs of wider conflict often appear long before the full crisis becomes obvious to the public. And many believe some of those warning signs are already here. Section 4. The Asia-Pacific, a new center of global power tension. While the Middle East and Europe dominate many headlines, another region is quietly becoming one of the most strategically important areas in the world: the Asia-Pacific. This region is home to some of the world's most powerful economies, largest militaries, busiest trade routes, and most sensitive territorial disputes. It is also a place where military competition, alliance politics, and strategic signaling are becoming more visible year after year. What makes the Asia-Pacific so important is simple. If a major conflict erupts there, the impact would be immediate and global. The region is central to world trade, shipping, manufacturing, technology supply chains, and military balance. It is where many global powers are now testing each other's strength, influence, and resolve. Naval activity is closely monitored. Air defense zones are highly sensitive. Strategic waters are becoming more militarized. Diplomatic statements are often carefully worded but deeply significant. And once again, the greatest danger is not always deliberate war. Sometimes the most dangerous scenarios begin with miscalculation. A ship moves too close. A patrol crosses a line. A warning is misread. A military exercise sends the wrong signal. An interception becomes a confrontation. And suddenly, what began as a tactical incident becomes an international crisis. The world has entered an era where military power is being displayed more openly, and strategic patience is being tested more frequently. In the Asia-Pacific, that means the stakes are incredibly high. If multiple regional crises in the world are already active, then a serious security incident in this region could create exactly the kind of multi-front instability that global analysts fear most. That is why governments far beyond Asia are watching this region with extraordinary caution tonight. Because in the modern world, regional conflict does not stay regional for long. Section 5. The new battlefield. Cyber warfare and digital attacks. One of the biggest differences between old wars and modern conflict is that today's battlefield is not only on land, sea, or air, it is also online. And that means the next major escalation may not begin with explosions visible on television. It may begin with screens going dark. Cyber warfare has become one of the most dangerous and least visible dimensions of global conflict. Governments, military systems, financial institutions, communication networks, power grids, transportation systems, and even hospitals are now potential targets in a high-stakes digital battlefield. This changes the meaning of war itself. A nation may not need to send tanks across a border to create chaos. It can attack banking systems, communication networks, or critical infrastructure. It can spread panic through misinformation. It can disrupt transportation. It can interfere with emergency services. It can shake public trust without firing a single visible shot. That is why cybersecurity experts are warning that if international tensions continue rising, cyber attacks could become one of the first major signs of a broader confrontation. And the danger here is enormous, because cyber attacks are often difficult to trace quickly and accurately. Attribution can take time, responses can be delayed or misdirected. False assumptions can escalate already tense situations. In other words, a cyber attack during a global crisis can be just as dangerous as a physical military strike. Some experts even argue it can be worse, because confusion, fear, and uncertainty can spread before the public even understands what is happening. Tonight, many governments are not only watching troop movements and missile systems, they are also watching servers, networks, satellites, and digital infrastructure. Because in the 21st century, a major world conflict may begin with a code, not a cannon. Section 6. How global alliances could change everything. Another reason tonight's tensions feel so dangerous is because of alliances. In the modern world, countries are not acting alone. Many are connected through defense treaties, strategic partnerships, intelligence sharing, and military cooperation agreements. These relationships are designed to provide security and deterrence. But in a crisis, they can also dramatically expand the scale of conflict. This is one of the central fears of every military strategist watching the world tonight. If one crisis pulls in one ally, and that ally pulls in another, a regional war can become international very quickly. That is how global wars become possible. Alliances are meant to prevent aggression by making the cost of conflict too high. And often, they do help maintain peace. But they also create obligations, expectations, and political pressures that can become extremely difficult to manage when events move fast. If a nation under threat calls for support, how do allies respond? If military assistance is provided, how is that interpreted by rivals? If deterrence is strengthened, does it calm tensions or increase them? These are not abstract questions anymore. They are real strategic calculations being made in capitals around the world tonight. Military planners understand that in a highly connected global security environment, timing matters, messaging matters, and misreading intentions can be catastrophic. And because alliances involve both military and political commitments, every public statement from leaders is being watched carefully for signs of escalation, reassurance, or warning. This is why diplomatic language has become so important in moments like these. Sometimes a sentence from a leader can calm a crisis. Other times, one sentence can deepen it. That is the world we are living in now. A world where alliances can protect peace, but also, if badly tested, accelerate conflict. Section 7. The economic war has already begun. Even before any official global war declaration, one thing is already clear. Economic warfare is already here. In today's world, countries do not need to fight only with missiles and armies. They can also fight through sanctions, trade restrictions, financial pressure, export controls, supply chain disruption, and strategic resource competition. And in many ways, this economic battlefield is already shaping the global crisis. When tensions rise between major powers, the world economy reacts immediately. Markets become nervous, energy prices jump, investors pull back, shipping costs increase, insurance premiums rise, trade slows down, consumer confidence weakens. For ordinary people, this can mean something very simple but very painful: higher prices, fewer jobs, more uncertainty. That is why even the fear of war can damage economies before a single large battle begins. Oil and gas markets are especially sensitive. Any instability involving key production zones, shipping routes, or major suppliers can quickly trigger global ripple effects. Food systems can also be hit, especially if transportation or agricultural exports are disrupted. And then there is the question of strategic industries: semiconductors, rare earth minerals, energy infrastructure, shipping technology, telecommunications, and defense manufacturing. These are no longer just business sectors. They are now considered national security priorities. This means economic competition is becoming more militarized, and military conflict is becoming more economic. The result? A world where war pressure can reach people's homes through bills, prices, and financial stress long before it reaches battlefields on television. That is why economists and defense experts are increasingly speaking the same language. Because in the modern era, the economy is not separate from war, it is part of it. Section 8. What world leaders are trying to avoid. Behind the dramatic headlines, military alerts, and public statements, there is one thing many world leaders are desperately trying to prevent: a crisis that nobody can control once it starts. This is one of the most dangerous realities of international conflict. Sometimes leaders do not want full-scale war, but events move faster than diplomacy. A strike happens, a retaliation follows, public anger rises, political pressure builds, national pride becomes involved, domestic politics harden. And suddenly, leaders who once had room to negotiate feel trapped by events. This is how history has often become more dangerous than anyone intended. And that is why today's diplomacy is so urgent. Even when public speeches sound strong and uncompromising, private channels often tell a different story. Behind the scenes, governments may be sending messages through embassies, military hotlines, intelligence contacts, or neutral intermediaries in an attempt to reduce the risk of misunderstanding. These hidden channels matter enormously, because in moments of tension, communication can save lives. A direct line between military commands can prevent a false alarm from becoming a real conflict. A back-channel message can stop a retaliation cycle. A quiet diplomatic signal can create space for de-escalation. But these efforts only work if leaders still believe there is something to gain from restraint. And that is the question the world is asking tonight. Do the major players still want to pull back, or are they preparing to push forward? No one outside the highest levels of government can fully know the answer. But one thing is clear: if diplomacy fails now, the cost could be historic. Section 9. The role of media, fear, and global panic. In moments like these, information becomes almost as powerful as military force. And that means the media environment itself can shape global tension. When dramatic headlines spread rapidly across television, social media, live streams, messaging apps, and news alerts, public fear can rise at extraordinary speed. Rumors travel faster than official statements. Misinformation can spread before facts are verified. Emotional reactions can become international before diplomats even speak. This creates a second layer of crisis: the battle for perception. Governments know that public opinion matters. Military messaging matters, images matter, headlines matter, narratives matter. In modern conflict, controlling the story is part of controlling the battlefield. That is why every military statement, every leaked report, every satellite image, and every viral video is now part of a larger information war. And for ordinary people trying to understand what is real, the result can be overwhelming. One report says escalation is imminent. Another says diplomacy is still working. One expert warns of disaster. Another says panic is exaggerated. So, what should people understand tonight? They should understand that global tensions are indeed serious. But they should also understand that not every alarming headline means total war has begun. Fear spreads fastest when information is incomplete. That is why calm analysis matters more than ever. The world does not need panic. It needs clarity. And tonight, clarity tells us this: the risks are real. The danger is rising. But the future is not yet decided. Section 8. What world leaders are trying to avoid. Behind the dramatic headlines, military alerts, and public statements, there is one thing many world leaders are desperately trying to prevent: a crisis that nobody can control once it starts. This is one of the most dangerous realities of international conflict. Sometimes leaders do not want full-scale war, but events move faster than diplomacy. A strike happens, a retaliation follows, public anger rises, political pressure builds, national pride becomes involved, domestic politics harden. And suddenly, leaders who once had room to negotiate feel trapped by events. This is how history has often become more dangerous than anyone intended. And that is why today's diplomacy is so urgent. Even when public speeches sound strong and uncompromising, private channels often tell a different story. Behind the scenes, governments may be sending messages through embassies, military hotlines, intelligence contacts, or neutral intermediaries in an attempt to reduce the risk of misunderstanding. These hidden channels matter enormously, because in moments of tension, communication can save lives. A direct line between military commands can prevent a false alarm from becoming a real conflict. A back-channel message can stop a retaliation cycle. A quiet diplomatic signal can create space for de-escalation. But these efforts only work if leaders still believe there is something to gain from restraint. And that is the question the world is asking tonight. Do the major players still want to pull back, or are they preparing to push forward? No one outside the highest levels of government can fully know the answer. But one thing is clear: if diplomacy fails now, the cost could be historic. Section 9. The role of media, fear, and global panic. In moments like these, information becomes almost as powerful as military force. And that means the media environment itself can shape global tension. When dramatic headlines spread rapidly across television, social media, live streams, messaging apps, and news alerts, public fear can rise at extraordinary speed. Rumors travel faster than official statements. Misinformation can spread before facts are verified. Emotional reactions can become international before diplomats even speak. This creates a second layer of crisis: the battle for perception. Governments know that public opinion matters. Military messaging matters, images matter, headlines matter, narratives matter. In modern conflict, controlling the story is part of controlling the battlefield. That is why every military statement, every leaked report, every satellite image, and every viral video is now part of a larger information war. And for ordinary people trying to understand what is real, the result can be overwhelming. One report says escalation is imminent. Another says diplomacy is still working. One expert warns of disaster, another says panic is exaggerated. So, what should people understand tonight? They should understand that global tensions are indeed serious. But they should also understand that not every alarming headline means total war has begun. Fear spreads fastest when information is incomplete. That is why calm analysis matters more than ever. The world does not need panic, it needs clarity. And tonight, clarity tells us this: the risks are real, the danger is rising, but the future is not yet decided. Section 10. What happens if the situation gets worse? This is the question millions are asking tonight. If global tensions continue to rise, what happens next? The answer depends on how the current flashpoints evolve. But broadly speaking, experts often describe several possible escalation scenarios. Scenario 1. Limited regional escalation. In this scenario, conflict intensifies in one or two regions but remains geographically contained. Military operations increase, but major powers avoid direct confrontation. The world experiences serious economic and political fallout, but global war is still avoided. Scenario 2. Proxy expansion. In this scenario, multiple powers increase support to partners, allies, or regional actors without fighting each other directly. This creates a broader and more dangerous international confrontation, even if formal war between great powers is still avoided. Scenario 3. Strategic miscalculation. This is one of the most feared scenarios. A mistake, accident, interception, or misunderstood military action triggers direct escalation that leaders did not originally intend. Once this happens, events can move very fast. Scenario 4. Multi-front global crisis. This is the nightmare scenario. Several regional tensions flare at the same time. Military alliances become involved. Cyber attacks increase. Energy markets panic. Naval pressure intensifies. Diplomatic channels become overwhelmed. The world enters a period of simultaneous, connected instability that would not necessarily look exactly like past world wars, but it could still be a historic international emergency. This is why the current moment matters so much. Because while the world has not crossed the line into total global war, many experts believe it is dangerously close to the kinds of conditions where history can turn suddenly. Section 11. What this means for ordinary people. For many viewers watching tonight, this may all sound massive, strategic, and far away. But global conflict fears do not stay confined to military maps and government briefings. They eventually affect ordinary life. People feel it in fuel prices, in food costs, in business uncertainty, in travel disruption, in stock market swings, in internet safety concerns, in political instability, and above all, in the emotional weight of living through an uncertain world. Parents worry about the future. Workers worry about prices. Students worry about opportunities. Families worry about safety. Communities worry about what comes next. That is why this story matters so deeply. Because when the world enters a period of serious instability, the consequences are never only geopolitical. They become personal. And that is exactly why leaders are under such pressure tonight to avoid mistakes, avoid escalation, and avoid decisions that could make a bad situation irreversible. Section 12. The big question: are we really heading toward World War? So now we come to the most important question of all. Are we really heading toward World War? The honest answer tonight is this: not officially. But the risk environment is more dangerous than many people are comfortable admitting. A true world war is still not inevitable. Diplomacy is still active. Deterrence is still functioning in some areas. And many leaders still understand the catastrophic cost of uncontrolled escalation. But at the same time, the warning signs cannot be ignored. Too many crises are active. Too many rivalries are intensifying. Too many systems are under pressure. Too many militaries are on alert. Too many regions are unstable at once. That does not guarantee global war. But it does mean the margin for error is shrinking. And in world history, Some of the darkest chapters began when leaders believed they still had more time than they actually did. That is why tonight's situation is so serious. Because the world is not only facing conflict, it is facing connected conflict. And connected conflict is how local danger becomes global danger.